Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, March 23rd, 2026, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today we're going to be doing something a little differently. I'm going to be doing a history podcast. I'm going to do these from time to time, and this will be the first one because I am so interested in this topic. Today, we are going to be talking about the history of monster trucks, monster truck racing, and how the industry of monster trucks came to be what they are today. Our story begins all the way back in 1974. Bob and Marilyn Chandler of St. Louis, Missouri, used to take Bob's 1974 Ford F-250 pickup and their Caravan and drive all the way up to Alaska for a vacation. The problem was, as they were off-roading and going into the great beyond, he kept breaking parts. Every year he'd break bigger parts, so he would go back to his job at the Midwest Four-Wheel Drive and Performance Center that he owned in St. Louis, and he would add bigger and stronger parts to his truck. And slowly, his truck, a blue 1974 Ford F-250 pickup, got bigger and bigger. First, it was strengthening the axles. And then when he got bigger axles, he had to strengthen the transmission. And he was, then it was a stronger engine, and he had to beef up the frame and the suspension, and before too long, his truck was massive. Even with those beefier parts, the most peculiar thing started happening. He continued to break parts, to the point where his friends and those in the 4x4 world used to call him Bigfoot, because his big foot kept breaking all the parts. And as a joke, he wrote that nickname on the side of his pickup truck, Bigfoot. He wrote it in small letters on the door, right above the Midwest Four-Wheel Drive and Performance Center logos that were emblazoned on his truck at the time, and thus, Bigfoot was born. As four-wheel drives became more popular, events like truck pulls, mud bogging, and hill climbing started becoming more prominent features of these big four-wheel drive trucks. And these trucks aren't just your average F-150 pickup like you see today. They would usually have big farm tractor tires, bigger engines, and there was a certain kind of show truck aspect to everything. Like, the way I can kind of explain it would be like if you've ever seen the cars that you see at like a SEMA show, or those kind of like at like an auto show where people bust out their custom cars. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, where chrome bumpers, chrome roll bars, big KC lights, chrome wheels, tall, really elaborate painting, big tires. But that's all they were. They were hill climbing, mud bogging, truck pulling. That was it. That was they were just four-wheel drives that did cool stuff. It was at one of these events, a hill climb at the Gravel-orama, which was a 70-degree angle, like 150-foot tall pea gravel hill, incredibly hard to get up. The hill still exists today. They still do Gravel-orama stuff at it. But while Chandler was at the Gravel-orama, he was laying underneath his truck along with a sales rep for the Rockwell Axle Company. And at the time, Rockwell made all of the axles for the United States military's 2.5-ton, 5-ton, and 10-ton trucks. And this sales rep was explaining that on the 5-ton military axles with their big, elaborate differential gear hubs, they only made one kind of axle. They made the front. And in order for the supply chain, you would basically lock the steering pinion in place straight ahead, and then you just move the front axle to the rear if you needed to replace a rear axle. And being the smart, industrious, creative guy that Bob Chandler is, he said, well, if the rear axle can also turn, then could you use it for steering? And so Bob Chandler put hydraulic rear steering on his truck. And suddenly Bigfoot could steer with all four wheels. And he dubbed it a 4x4x4. And to this day, Bigfoot will have a 4x4x4 somewhere on the body scheme. And initially, Chandler would control the system with a set of buttons on the floor near the panels. That way he could just, while he's driving with his right foot, he could just tap the buttons to steer it with his left foot while steering the front wheels with the steering wheel. But one day, while he's driving down the freeway, his foot accidentally sat on that button, and all of a sudden his truck is crab walking down the middle of the freeway and ran some poor lady off the road, and he realized, that shouldn't be a button because that's kind of dangerous. So he moved it to a toggle switch that he put on the driver's side door. And from then on, rear steering was a toggle switch positioned somewhere within the cabin. And there were other technical hiccups along the way, like, stopping is really hard. And they realized with the big tires and the heavy weight and the big engines, the size of a disc brake you would need would be huge. So instead, guys like Chandler started putting the brake rotors on the differential on the axles themselves, on the diff. They would have an open diff with a disc brake right on the differential, and that's where the brake rotor would be, because you had a much higher ratio of brake force at the differential than you would at all four tires. So that's why monster trucks to this day have their brake rotors on the differential for their axles. And if you go to an event and you see them stopping, you'll see the differentials glowing orange because that's where the brake rotors are. But there were tons of little gremlins like this. How do you steer the big thing? How do you stop the thing? How do you turn? How do you handle the rigors of truck pulls and mud bogs and hill climbs and all that? And slowly over the course of the late 70s and the early 80s, these trucks just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And suddenly the appeal of these trucks was these things are huge and they got these big tires and they can do all this four-wheel steering and they're, truck pulling and all this other stuff, and they're really loud, and that was the thing. So at this point, Bob Chandler's Bigfoot is sporting a 640 cubic inch carbureted blower motor, giving off, I think, over 800 horsepower at the time. Don't quote me on that. Going that far back, the history is kind of murky. Either way, the truck was also featuring 48-inch tall farm Terra tires. Now, these aren't the monster truck tires that everyone knows. These are 48 inches tall. They're much narrower, but this is where the trucks were at the time. It was tractor tires and 48-inch tall Terras and that kind of thing. Nobody had even thought about using the flotation tires, and I'll get to those in a second. So, on April 21st, 1981, Bob Chandler, his wife Marilyn, and his friend Jim Kramer lined up two cars side by side in a field near Chandler's home. And he decided, just to see if he could do it, he decided to drive over the cars. And it isn't like today where you'd see them hit the side of the car and leap over it. It was basically driving up onto the tailgate, up over the cab, onto the hood, and down the other side. And Bigfoot does it. Crawls up onto the cars and stops, and the roofs cave in, and the windows blow out. And they've got it on tape. And in the tape, which you can find on the internet to this day, you can hear Marilyn Chandler laughing hysterically because it's the most absurd thing they'd ever seen. And then they went around again and did it a second time. And this time they drove up over it much faster. And you can see the tools in the bed of the truck bouncing around from the heavy punishment. And Chandler said, that's pretty freaking cool. And he started displaying this tape in his Midwest four-wheel drive and performance center shop in St. Louis on a TV screen, a small TV on the ceiling, just playing it on a loop all day long. And people would come in from all over the place just to watch this tape of a pickup truck driving over two cars. And then a promoter working for the Pontiac Silverdome, he got word of this tape and he went and saw it and he said, okay, we got to do this in front of a crowd. And initially, Bob Chandler was hesitant. He's like, no, it's absurd, it's violent, I don't really want, I don't want that to be kind of a thing. And this back and forth went on for a year before finally, in, I think it was December of 1982, this promoter convinces Bob Chandler to take Bigfoot 2, By this time, he has had to build a second Bigfoot truck because Bigfoot is very popular doing truck pulls, mud bogs, hill climbing, that kind of thing. And he takes Bigfoot 2 to the Pontiac Silverdome, and they line up 4 cars. And this is at a truck pulling event, mind you. The monster truck shows will not exist for several more years. So, the night comes. Bob Chandler's got Bigfoot 2, and this time, by now, he is sporting the iconic 66-inch tall flotation tires. And these tires are called flotation tires because the original use case for current monster truck tires was for fertilizer spreader trucks. And the idea was you had these massive tires that are 66 inches tall, 43 inches wide, and you have like maybe 8 pounds per square inch. So they're super squishy. And the idea is the tires just kind of float over the crops, so you can drive over the crops without tearing them up, because the tire just floats over the top of them. It distributes the weight. It's not as disruptive. Which, yeah, and they're still used today. If you go to certain farms, big farms, you can see these big tractors with 66-inch tall Goodyear and Firestone and BKT flotation tires. So, by now, these trucks are called, now in 1982, these trucks are called monster trucks, but they're still just truck pull and mud bog and hill climbing. And some of them are starting to get the 66-inch tall tires. We're starting to get there. And the Pontiac Silverdome, they got 4 cars lined up, 2x2, bumper to bumper. So it'll basically be 2 cars and then 2 cars lined up immediately after that where they're all touching each other. And Bigfoot 2 comes out, does a couple of laps, shows off the rear steering, fans ooh and ah, and he lines up to the cars, and he drives over them. And the crowd went bananas. To this day, Chandler calls it the flash attack. And this video exists. You can see this video on the internet. When Bigfoot drives up onto the cars, every camera in the stadium went off at once. Like, flash, 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 flash. A million flashes all at once. And fans lost their gosh darn minds. Fans jumped the wall into the infield and started surrounding the truck. So where the grandstands in the Silverdome emptied onto the floor, and these guys just were surrounding the truck because no one had ever seen anything like this before. And Chandler has got his kid, he's got his son in the truck with him, so they roll up the windows and lock the doors, and they're like freaking out because, what are they going to do? They can't even move because the truck is 15,700 pounds at this point, and if they move wrong, they'll kill somebody. So they just have to sit there on top of these cars, locked in their truck for 40 minutes until security can get the fans back in the crowd. And from then on, monster trucks would never be the same. Monster trucks as they are today is born. That's the day. It was December of 1982 at the Pontiac Silverdome. And the Silverdome, mind you, was vital. It was the mecca of monster trucks for decades. Every year, massive shows, year after year after year, which is why when they tore down the Silverdome, they put on one last monster truck show in 2008, and a whole bunch of heavy hitters were there, and it was a big old show before they tore the place down because it was like the Indianapolis Motor Speedway of monster trucks. So, but I digress. That's beside the point. So monster trucks are very popular. It is a sensation. And by this time, you're starting to see other trucks popping up. You've got Everett Jasmer's USA 1. Everett Jasmer from, Spring Lake Park, Minnesota, I think is where he lives. And he's got a 1978 Chevrolet Silverado, I think. And it's painted blue like Bigfoot. And he's got a big blower motor, and he's got chrome wheels, and it's a monster truck, but it's a stage 1 monster truck, and I'll get to the whole stages thing a little later. But the truck is big, and it's got a big motor, and he was doing a lot of the same events that Bob Chandler was doing, so you're starting to see these rivalry. And there were other trucks, like Fred Schaefer's Barefoot. Now, Fred is no longer with us. Chandler and Jasmer are still with us, but Fred Schaefer died many years ago, but his Barefoot trucks are still around. They're owned by, I don't know who owns their truck. Forgive me, I don't know. But Fred Schaefer's original Barefoot. And this is, once again, a blue Chevrolet. And it usually had like yellow lettering on the door. It said Fred Schaefer's Barefoot. And he'd do a lot of the same events. You had Dan DeGrasso's Beast, which was an old 1950s Dodge Power Wagon truck with a huge motor. And DeGrasso's truck was interesting because the guys who were building these trucks were noticing the frames aren't great. So what they were doing is if you were having to really beef up the frames so the truck didn't snap itself in half with the big tires and the engine and the torque and the weight. So he had welded a 5-ton truck's frame from a junkyard underneath the truck frame for the truck to strengthen everything up, and then put all the suspension under that. And you're starting to see more of that. And the weight is going up, and the trucks are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you also had two other really big names from those early days were Jeff Dane, who is still around. He's in the Hall of Fame. And his truck, King Kong. He still has this truck, by the way. Like, I don't know about the fate of Fred Schaefer's Barefoot or Dan DeGrasso's Beast. I think the Beast is still around. But Jasmer's USA 1, or the original truck, is still around. Jeff Dane's original King Kong is still around. And the last name I want to talk about is Jack Willman, Taurus, another one of the godfathers of monster trucks. And I'm pretty sure his original Taurus truck is still around somewhere. So these old guys, the old guard, the initial crop of trucks, monster trucks is popular, but it's still just a sideshow. And then in 1984, the show That's Incredible decided they wanted to have monster trucks race each other. It's the first time it had ever happened. And on That's Incredible, they went to a drag strip, and I think it was 300 feet of drag strip, and they just lined up cars 2x2, bumper to bumper, going on forever and ever and ever. And Everett Jasmer's USA 1, which was still navy blue, and Bob Chandler's Bigfoot, and they had a race. And the race took 3 minutes because they were just slowly crawling over the cars. And I'm pretty sure the footage of that is still out there somewhere. Bob Chandler, Team Bigfoot saves everything. Every event they ever did, they have footage of it. So they have this extensive archive of just everything, and there's footage of everything out there. But either way, so it's the first televised monster truck race in history. And suddenly the idea of, we can race these things. We don't just have to compete at truck pulls and mud bogs and hill climbs. And, maybe we don't have to just crush cars at truck pulls and mud bogs and hill climbs. Maybe these things can be competitive. We can start competing against each other. So, in 1986, at the Louisiana Superdome, the world's first monster truck racing event, where the monster trucks were the headliner, takes place. And there were 8 trucks in attendance. There was the brand new at the time Bigfoot 4, more on that truck later, along with Everett Jasmer's USA 1, and USA 1 was now sporting USA 1's iconic white with the stars and stripes banners going down the side. It's an iconic paint scheme. Every USA 1 truck from then on sported this paint scheme. And there was also Jeff Dane's awesome Kong 2, Kirk Dabney's Blue Thunder, Barry Wentz was driving Frankenstein, Cliff Starboard with Monster Vet, Brett Engelman with the Michigan Ice Monster, and Jeff Oldacre with Rollin' Thunder. And Rollin' Thunder was a Ford equipment van on a military truck frame with big tires. This truck was 15 feet tall and 16 feet and 12 or 13 feet long. Weighed 17,000 pounds. The truck was enormous. It was big and orange. But anyways, this event would feature side-by-side racing that would require them. So the trucks at the starting line would have to pull a sled, like sled pulling, and then they'd go halfway down the strip to pull the sled, where they'd back up and have the sled detached from the truck, and from then they'd go down the stretch, turn left, cross over each other because the lanes were next to the original starting lanes. They'd go up over a hill, down the hill, crush 6 cars, then they would jump into a mud pit and crush more cars, and when their back tires hit the ground after that, that was the finish line, and it was whoever got their back tires on the ground after the final set of cars won. And the idea was, make monster trucks do absolutely everything that they're famous for. Mud bogging, hill climbing, truck pulling, car crushing. And Bigfoot 4, driven by Jim Cramer, a Hall of Famer in his own right, he won. And partly because Bigfoot 4 was the first real, Stage 2 truck. And I'll get to that in a second. And the truck was a little more modern. It was a little lighter. It was a little more built for action. It was built for speed, so to speak. Now, it wasn't a race truck by any means, but the truck was better, and it dominated the competition. And once again, this footage is out there. You can watch this whole thing on the internet. It was part of a VHS series, a trilogy of VHSs called the Battle of the Monster Trucks, which featured car crushing. Then there was the Return of the Monster Trucks, which featured the Louisiana Superdome event, and then there was the War of the Monster Trucks. And once again, all of these VHSs are out there on DVD and they're on the internet. But this was immensely popular, and the idea germinated like, okay, monster trucks can be the main event. There's enough fan interest for monster truck racing to become its own thing. And then in 1987, TNT Motorsports, and this is not anything to do with the network TNT, but TNT Motorsports, which was a rival promoter with like the USHRA and stuff like that, they had the Redman TNT All-American Pulling Series. And Redman is chewing tobacco or pouches. I don't remember it. Either way, I guess it's disgusting stuff. Anyway, so they had the national pulling series championship that toured the country, and they started at these events. The monster trucks were the main event, and they'd have a monster course, and 12 trucks would show up, and they'd qualify, and they'd race, and they'd also have truck pulling with the big tractor pulling event and everything. And in 1987, it's interesting because a lot of these events are on YouTube, and when you watch them compared to what monster truck racing would become, they look very rudimentary because the tracks are interesting. Very steep ramps that are very short, crushed cars, ramps that are really unsafe, very minimal room to shut the trucks down after the finish line and everything. And there's very little standardization of safety and all this. And it's worth noting that it wasn't until the very late 80s where there was universally agreed upon, you got to wear a fire suit made of Nomex, you wear a kidney belt to protect your kidneys and your back, you wear a neck collar for whiplash, a helmet, fireproof gloves, a balaclava, fireproof shoes. You have to have onboard fire extinguishers, the remote ignition interrupter to turn the truck off if you crash. All these safety things. This didn't become standardized until 1988. So there's a lot of these trucks where people are just driving around with their cowboy hat and a t-shirt, and they're jumping through the air racing. The truck catches fire, it rolls over, and it was very cowboy back in the days. But as these guys started racing and they started saying, man, these trucks are really punishing and they're really dangerous, and we gotta, the speeds are slowly creeping up and the punishment is getting bad, they realized, okay, trucks got to get better, trucks got to get more, got to get significantly safer, and the courses themselves have to kind of change. And this is where the MTRA, or the Monster Truck Racing Association, came in. They decided, all right, there are some ground rules for how much shutdown area you have to have. You have to have an official with a remote ignition interrupter switch, which is basically a walkie-talkie where if you press the button for the truck with the walkie-talkie, it turns the truck's ignition and fuel system off to turn the truck off. That way, if it's out of control and they can't stop it, you just press the button and the truck stops. And they standardize safety equipment and all this stuff. So the MTRA kicks in, and there's all these safety features, and the tracks are getting better. But from a monster truck perspective, it became obvious that the first generation of trucks weren't up to it. They're just beefing up your pickup truck and putting big tires on it. The trucks were breaking, they were crashing, they were beating the tar out of drivers. Guys were, having kidney pain, bruised kidneys, peeing blood, breaking backs. It was ridiculous. Mike Welch, who drove the Super Pete, which think of a straight stock Peterbilt semi-truck, but with monster truck tires. Now, the problem is because the truck is already so tall, he didn't have any shocks underneath it. He just welded the axles to the frame. That way it looked normal. Well, the problem with this is that there's no suspension. So this truck was ridiculous. It bounced and bounced and bounced and threw him around in the cabin. He'd have bruised kidneys, or another one was Dave Marquardt, who was one of the co-owners of the Excalibur truck. Excalibur, great truck, awesome looking truck. This truck was the first truck built with computer-aided design, so it had better working suspension, but at the end of the day, it was still very much a Stage 1, Generation 1 truck, and Dave Marquardt broke his spine twice driving this truck because the ride was so punishing. So this is where we get to stages. Stage 1 trucks, and I'm going to explain the stages now. The Stage 1 trucks were beefed up pickup truck, strengthened frame, lots of suspension shocks, but very minimal travel, super heavy, iffy safety. These are trucks like the original USA 1, Barefoot, Dan DeGrasso's Beast, Bigfoot 1, Bigfoot 2, Bigfoot 3, a lot of those kind of trucks. And then you had Stage 2, which were very much mid-80s, late 80s onward. And the Stage 2 trucks, these are trucks that were built for racing. Now, they were still using leaf springs, like you'd see on a pickup truck, or coil springs, big coil springs, but the trucks would have what's called a straight rail frame, which picture a 3-inch thick metal bar that's welded together, like parallel with like support beams, and everything is welded to that, and the straight rail frame is then welded to the original truck frame to give it more ride height and more strength. And like Bigfoot 4 is one of these. Bigfoot 4 is a straight rail framed Stage 2 truck, and the trucks were a little lighter. They're still really, really heavy, still 14,000 pounds, but they're much safer because there's a lot less frame torsion, and it's easier on the equipment, so you're not breaking as many transmissions and axles and blowing up engines and stuff, and the trucks are just better. And as the late 80s went on, these Stage 2 trucks got really fast. USA 1 got really fast, and Outlaw and Gravedigger and all these other Barefoot and Bigfoot and all these trucks, and they got faster and faster and faster. But, as I'll mention later, Bob Chandler felt, monster trucks need to evolve again, and he built a truck that was a Stage 3 truck. And Stage 3 trucks are what you see today. Tube frame like a trophy truck, nitrogen charged shocks, fiberglass body, Lexan floor, really, really safe, significantly lighter, much better shock travel, much safer, much faster. That was a Stage 3 truck, but we'll get to the Stage 3 trucks anyways. So in 1988, TNT Motorsports, wanted to kind of keep going with this whole monster truck racing thing, establishes the Renegades, once again, chewing tobacco or tobacco pouches, I don't know, Renegades Monster Truck Challenge Series. And this was the world's first like F1, NASCAR, IndyCar style national points championship racing series for monster trucks. 1988 was the first season. And the USHRA was also hosting monster truck races at this time, but they didn't have an organized championship. So TNT was kind of the only show in town when it came to racing championship. So you had all the best drivers. You had Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher, Dennis Anderson with Gravedigger, Bob Chandler's Bigfoot driven by one of his drivers, Everett Jasmer had a truck, Jeff Dane and his partner Steve Kane, they had one of the King Kong trucks or an Awesome Kong truck, and so you're getting the best of the best at this series. The fastest of the fast, Bennett Clark and his Clydesdale truck. Jesse Berge with wild hair, Marvin Smith with his wild hair. So you're getting all these really fast trucks, and the competition is fierce. And from the beginning of 1988 to the end of 1988, you're seeing a rapid evolution in speed, track design, and performance of these trucks, because in the beginning, it's still very much, golly gee, I don't want to break anything, let's go kind of slow. And by the end of it, it's like, no, there's money on the line. We're gonna fly over those 15 cars. And USA 1, Everett Jasmer, one of the founding fathers, he decided, much like Bigfoot, I need a truck built for racing. So he built USA 1 number 2, and this truck still exists, which I love. It's my favorite truck of all time. I'll be honest, I love USA 1 number 2. It was a 1988 Chevrolet Silverado 2500. Now, what's interesting is Jasmer didn't do a straight rail frame. He did what was called a C-channel frame, which is basically a truck frame, but he had beefed up the crap out of it. And this truck had some unique, interesting differences than a lot of other trucks. So this truck had a blown and carbureted 572 cubic inch big block Chevrolet motor, and he had nitrous oxide canister. So this truck had an insane amount of power. Now the other thing is, this truck had some unique kind of inventions with suspension, where they would have these like support struts that go from the frame to the axle to make sure that the tires don't twist and go in strange directions, but that obviously limits your shock travel. So Jasmer's truck, much like some of the Bigfoot trucks, would have basically a shock absorber on the front struts, basically, to allow the suspension to work better. And the truck had some very exotic rear suspension that gave it a little more control. But the biggest difference is, unlike every other monster truck in the world, USA 1 number 2 had no differential gear ratio thing in the hubs. So the trucks have basically, because of the torque and the weight involved, trucks have differential gear systems in each hub, and basically it's one gear called a sun gear that's orbited by 3 other gears. And as the sun gear spins, it rotates the other gears, and that's what turns the tire. And it's a gear reduction to lower the strain on the drivetrain, but obviously it limits your wheel speed. So Jasmer felt, I'd rather break transmissions and drive shafts and have better wheel speed. So USA 1 number 2 was lightning fast. This truck was wicked fast. And it had a ton of power, and it was a little lighter than a lot of the trucks at the time. So this truck was fast, and it started the season late because they were still building it. But when it joined the 1988 championship, this truck dominated, and it won the championship, defeating Bigfoot 4, driven by Rich Hoosier at Freedom Hall in Louisville, Kentucky. And this building still exists, by the way. So, 1988. Speeds are increasing. It's a championship. 1989 rolls around. Okay, this is a real series. There's some real money. Guys are building better trucks. Like Steve Dane and Jeff Kane, they built Awesome Kong 2, which was a skinny truck that was like 44-inch wide body. So he had super crazy lightweight. It had really good visibility, but the truck looked strange. Google a picture. Awesome Kong 2. It looks very weird. But Carolina Crusher built a truck with a longer wheelbase, and USA 1 was still riding high, and Bennett Clark built a new Clydesdale truck, and all, so things are evolving. Trucks are getting faster, and the tracks themselves are getting faster. You're kind of realizing you need ramps that aren't too steep because you can break parts, but you need them steep enough where they can get some air, and it's usually basically starting line. In the arenas, it was starting line, big hill, and then a set of cars in the finish line. Where outside, it was starting line, short set of cars, space, long set of cars, finish line. So things are getting very standardized. We're getting into the groove of things. And Bob Chandler says, yeah, Bigfoot 4 is fast and it's competitive, but it's not safe to be driving like this, and we don't think our trucks like this should be racing at this intensity, so we're going to take the 1989 season off, and we're going to build us a new race truck from the ground up and come back and dominate in 1990. So Bigfoot is just gone. Poof. Not in TNT in 1989. Gary Cook, who was a mud truck driver, I think he was a mud racer, built what was called Equalizer. And the Equalizer brand still exists today, and the original Equalizer truck still exists, and this truck was space age. It had 4-link suspension like you'd see on a trophy truck or a rock crawler, and it had coil springs instead of leaf springs. And they weren't long coil springs, but they were coil springs. So it had like 10, 12 inches of shock travel. This truck was lighter. It didn't have as much power, but it didn't need as much power because it had much better suspension. So it really came down to Carolina Crusher, Equalizer, USA 1, and Equalizer won the 1989 championship, and it was like, okay, people are building these better trucks, and 1990 is going to be incredible. It's going to be a fast year. Speeds have never been better. We're getting crazy sponsorship, and then Bigfoot arrived. So USA 1 by this time, USA 1 had a sponsor. They had True Value Master Mechanic, and they were sponsored by Chevrolet, Heartbeat of America. And King Crunch, driven by Scott Stevens, owned by Scott Stevens at the time, had a lucrative auto value deal. They were the auto value King Crunch. Jersey Outlaw was sponsored by Super Winch, and Bigfoot had a new sponsor called Acclaim, which was a video game manufacturer at the time. And Bigfoot rolls out of the trailer in 1990 with Bigfoot 8. And Bigfoot 8 is the first Stage 3 truck first of its kind. All fiberglass body, nitrogen-charged shocks, just like they use today, first of its kind. Tube frame suspension, much more advanced 4-link suspension, 4-link kind of struts and ladder bars and stuff like that, and it's got anti-roll bars, and this truck has a much smaller engine. It only has a 500 cubic inch engine instead of like a 570 cubic inch engine. And it has a lot of power, but this truck, it doesn't need the big engines like USA 1. It doesn't need it. And Bigfoot 8 rolls off the trailer and is 1 second faster than everybody in the building. For like 6 weeks. This truck dominates. I guess Scott Stevens hated Bigfoot 8. He thought it was cheating. He's like, they weren't running with us. I mean, if I had taken a year off, I'd have built in a fancy schmancy new truck. So he was talking to Army Armstrong, the pit reporter for the television broadcast, at the first race at Albuquerque, New Mexico's local arena. And after he saw Bigfoot 8 run once, he turned to Army Armstrong and said, well, that's it. You might as well give him the trophy. That's a wrap. Bigfoot 8's going to win. He's got a second on the whole field. And Bigfoot 8 dominated. This truck was light years ahead of everybody. It was safer, faster, lighter, better in every way. And it was so good. It was dominating so bad. So absolutely. It's kind of hard there's no real like published schedule. So you're having to kind of piece together the schedule based on vibes. And from what I can gather, this truck won something like 12 of the first 14 events on the calendar. It just dominated over and over and over. It was like it would qualify best, win every race, set quick time, and then go home. It would just dominate. So drivers were complaining. They're like, this truck is ridiculous. It's so much faster than all of us. And they're all like, I can't compete with this. None of us can compete with us. USA 1, Carolina Crusher, Jersey Outlaw, Equalizer. None of them had anything for Bigfoot 8. So TNT banned the truck. They said, you got to take 3 months off. I'm sorry. You got to let everyone else catch up. So Bob Chandler, he protested, took him to court, but they changed the rule saying you have to either use coil springs or leaf springs. You cannot use nitrogen-charged shocks. And Bob Chandler said, fine, whatever. So Bigfoot 8 is now silent. It goes and does other events. And Team Bigfoot brings Bigfoot 4 back. And Bigfoot 4 runs leaf springs like old school, but it also runs a nitrogen-charged shock on each of the rear tires. And this truck is just spite and bad feelings at this point. This truck is old. It's a war horse, and it's driven by a guy named John Pyant. So I want to take a bit of a detour, and I want to talk about Bigfoot 4, because Bigfoot 4, in my opinion, is the greatest monster truck ever built. It is the gold standard, the GOAT. This truck, Bigfoot 4, which was built in 1985, drove competitively well into the mid-90s. And that's because this truck, which they nicknamed the Phoenix, had multiple transformations. So originally it was a normal Stage 2 truck with just tiny little shock absorbers and big leaf springs, and it was big and heavy, and it was rather brutal to drive. And then in 1990, when they started really getting into the whole nitrogen shocks thing for Bigfoot 8, Team Bigfoot said, I bet those leaf springs would handle better if they had a much bigger nitrogen shock on them to help them move better. So they put some on that truck. And that truck was fast that way. It wasn't like Equalizer Bigfoot 8 fast, but it was very fast in the TNT circuit. But the truck had problems because it's still a Stage 2 truck, and it's still very old, and it's just not designed for that. And then in the fall of 1990, the truck crashed. And by crashed, I mean totaled. They were doing a Bigfoot bash or something. It was like a family reunion, so to speak, of all the Bigfoot trucks. And he's racing Bigfoot 7, I think, and he jumps, and it's like at a drag strip, and the truck lands on the concrete wall, rips the frame in half, destroys the rear suspension, busts up the body. Truck is totaled. So Team Bigfoot decides, all right, back to the drawing board, and they make radical changes to this truck. The truck is unrecognizable. They change which direction the front struts are facing. They put them in front of the front axle instead of behind, and they give it 4-link suspension in the back, and it's got crazy leaf spring setup, and the truck is radically different. And the reason I bring all this up is because instead of calling it Bigfoot anymore, they decided, what if we put a 3D body on it? World's first 3D body made out of fiberglass, by the way. Snakebite. Snakebite. The original Snakebite truck was Bigfoot 4. So basically, it's like a pickup truck, but it's got like a cobra head for the hood, front clip and all that. And it's got some big old fangs sticking out of the grill. It's got big old eyes on the side of the front. And it was bright red. It was called Snakebite. And they got a toy deal, and they were really leaning up the whole, it's crazy thing. So they were it's funny to say it now, but they had their drivers, like in WWE, driving under a pseudonym. So like the all-time GOAT driver, Dan Runte, drove for Bigfoot for years. He sadly got killed in a motorcycle accident a couple years ago. God rest his soul. But back in those days, he drove as Ricky Radler, I think is what his name was, and he'd wear this like snake balaclava, and he'd do this like basically you take like your pointer finger and your ring finger and you bend them over like their claws and you just kind of wag them at the camera, the whole thing. And they really laid up like the whole, oh, he's out to get Bigfoot thing, and the kids loved it and they sold a whole bunch of toys. And Gene Patterson drove it as Colt Cobra for a while, and John Pyatt, he had a nickname, and Snakebite. And the thing is, because of the suspension changes to the Bigfoot 4 chassis, this truck was wild. It was fast, but its suspension was all over the place. This truck would crash. Like in 1991, this truck got out of control, veered off to the left, went through a fence on a fairground, drove over somebody's barn in their backyard. In 1992, it got out of control, jumped over a pit lane wall, and drove over Carolina Crusher. No one got hurt. Or another time where it got out of control in 1991 and went through a water barrier and totaled another guy's fence and drove over someone's car. The truck was very fast, but it was wild. Which, kids loved it because the truck was ridiculous. But this truck kept on driving, and it really ushered in the era of 3D bodies. Like, you'd have trucks like Bulldozer, which looked like a bull with the big horns. Nowadays, you can see that same body style as El Toro Loco. And other trucks like Maximum Destruction and Wild Thing and Predator and Prowler and Pouncer and Superman with the cape on the pickup truck, and Iron Man's got a 3D body, and Captain America's got a 3D body, and oh god, what's the other one? Jurassic Attack, which is basically a pickup truck with the Triceratops mouth and the 3 horns and the frill like a Triceratops, and it Robo Shark and all these other, Tailgater and all these other trucks. And the 3D era was because of Bigfoot 4. It's just another evidence of why Bigfoot 4 is like one of the greatest trucks ever. Anyways, back to our history lesson. So in September of 1990, during the middle of the TNT season, the USHRA bought TNT Motorsports, and they decided that for 1991, they were going to fold in the really popular events from the TNT calendar and just get rid of everything else. And they were going to fold that into their nascent Camel, Mud, and Monster Series, because in 1990, the USHRA got their own points championship called the Camel, Mud, and Monsters Series. More on that later. But anyway, so TNT, the era of TNT was numbered. So 1991, you've got 2 series competing for points series. You got the USHRA Camel, Mud, and Monster Series, which is a series points championship. And you've also got what was called the Penda Series. Now, Penda, P-E-N-D-A, was for the Pendaliner Bedliner brand of bedliner material. And they were sponsoring all of the Fairground Jamboree events. And these are events that are exclusively outside, exclusively drag racing, 2 sets of cars, very much TNT-style racing. And Penda was very much the spiritual successor of TNT. And in 1991, you started seeing, it was like, oh, the era of Stage 2 trucks is over, because like USA 1 showed up to the first Penda race, got spanked. It was eliminated in the first round. Carolina Crusher had a 3rd truck, a Stage 3 truck now. Gravedigger had a new truck, and Bigfoot was using Bigfoot number 9 at this point, which was even better than Bigfoot 8. And so it was like the era of the Stage 2 truck was over. So you're seeing this rapid transformation of monster truck racing where speeds are just catapulting forward, and they're jumping farther and faster, and trucks are innovating, and things are changing rapidly. But Penda was the more quote-unquote pure racing series because it was not invitational. It was open qualifying. It was outdoors drag racing. Yada yada yada. And meanwhile, the USHRA series is exploding in popularity. Now, for those of you who are on the older side, you might have remembered the Sunday, Sunday, Sunday kind of commercials for monster trucks with, stadium. That was USHRA. All of those were USHRA. So those events, Monster Jam as you know it today, that was the USHRA's brand of event. And that quickly became the most popular. Partly because Penda was dominated by Bigfoot. Carolina Crusher 3 won the championship in 1991, but Team Bigfoot won it in 1992, 93, 94, 95, and 96 before Penda stopped sponsoring the series, kind of went away. So, stadium truck shows are just super popular. They're just, this is the way. And more money is going into the thing and more attention, and, Gravedigger is exploding in popularity. And then 1993, the USHRA, in order to get their series on television, decides that they were going to create a television show called Monster Wars, which was basically just repackaging the 1993 USHRA Camel, Mud, and Monster series as Monster Wars. Now, the reason this is notable is because there was less emphasis on points racing, and basically the trucks became characters. Like, you'd have an actor dressed up in a suit that represented Carolina Crusher and Gravedigger and Predator and Rambo and all these other things. Not Rambo, but First Blood and Liquidator and all these things. And they would do skits like, "I'm coming for you, Equalizer." That very WWE. It was very WWF at the time. Very WCW wrestling. It was for children. They had Matchbox made toys, but you're starting to see the beginnings of the less serious monster truck era. And at this time, the WCW was really sponsoring Bigfoot. So Bigfoot had a truck dressed up as Hulkster, Hollywood Hogan, another one called Dungeon of Doom, and wrestling is starting to infect monster trucks as an kind of an industry. So, excuse me, it's getting less serious. And Monster Wars was only one season. It wasn't super popular. In 1994, they lost their broadcaster, and this Monster Wars as a brand went away. But USHRA kept on chugging. All right, now I want to go back and talk about Gravedigger. Much like Bigfoot 4, Gravedigger has a part to play in monster truck history. And that is, Gravedigger invented freestyling. Yeah. So Dennis Anderson, the founder and creator of Gravedigger, he started life as a farm hand at this big agricultural farm in Kill Devil Hills, South Carolina. And he had this old Chevy panel truck that was bright red, and he had tractor tires on it, and his buddies are talking crap, oh, your truck is so, to the beater. And he's like, I'm going to take that truck, go outside, I'm going to dig your grave. And they all like, ooh, and all that. And so he took a can of yellow spray paint and he spray painted Gravedigger on the side of the truck. And from then on, he was Gravedigger. He was the Gravedigger, and that truck was Gravedigger. And that started it all. And he started car crushing and doing the whole early monster trucks things. And then when racing comes along, he wants to race. So he gets himself a old school bus. And he rigs it up to be a thing that he could live in. And he tows the truck in a trailer behind the school bus. Now the problem is, Dennis Anderson was a very aggressive fellow, and his truck was different. He had a truck that had the engine mounted in the rear, and it was big. It was a big panel van. Anyone who has seen Gravedigger, you know what I'm talking about. The truck had the big spooky paint job, and it was Gravedigger. The truck's design philosophy hasn't changed much, even if the suspension and everything has. So he starts coming up to these TNT events, and he's always braking because his truck wasn't the Gravedigger 1, which they call Grandma. So Grandma still exists. It's at the Gravedigger Museum in South Carolina. So Grandma, poorly designed truck, broke a lot. Same thing with Gravedigger 2. So he was getting a nickname. He'd show up for qualifying. He'd go bat out of hell, just a good time, and break. So they were calling him One Run Anderson. And the problem is, his high-flying fast annex were popular. Kids loved the look of Gravedigger. They loved the toys and the shirts and everything. and they loved the excitement of his runs, but he was always braking. So he didn't want to disappoint fans, so he started convincing promoters, okay, after everyone's done with racing and you've crowned the thing, can you let me go back out onto the floor, and I'm going to run my junk around, and I'm going to jump some cars and do some stunts and, hoop and holler and all that, just to entertain the fans, just to make up for it. No points or anything, no prize money, nothing, just I'm going to do it to go show off. And fans freaking love this. And even though Gravedigger was never a points contender in TNT, he was still the third or second most popular truck in the series. Just because the high-flying action was very popular. And over time, other drivers like Mike Welch with his Super Pete started doing the same thing. And it started to become a thing called freestyle, where you'd go out and, mess around on the track. And going into the 90s, it wasn't expected, but almost every event would have freestyle, where they would just go out and mess around and do jumps and everything. And fans loved it. It became a expected eventually. It was like, by the mid-90s, every Monster Jam show had freestyle. Now, freestyle wasn't a competition. It was just go out there and show off. But that was going to change. So, in October of 1992, the USHRA officially stops calling themselves Monster Wars. And not officially, but unofficially, they referred to an event for the first time as Monster Jam. And by 1995, they rebranded the series as Monster Jam. And, quote-unquote, the rest is history. So in 1998, Pace Motorsports / SFX, which is currently called Feld Motorsports, which is owned by the Feld Group, which is, I think, Barnum and Bailey Circus and Monster Jam and the USHRA, and it's a billion-dollar organization and everything. So Pace Motorsports, owner and operator of the USHRA, began owning and operating their own fleet of trucks. And these are popular trucks. Like in 1998, they bought Gravedigger from Dennis Anderson. He continued to drive Dennis Anderson until 2015, I think, but they bought Gravedigger and Bulldozer and Monster Patrol maybe, and they owned like half the trucks that would be at a Monster Jam event. They owned those trucks. And this is kind of a turning point in my opinion, because when Monster Jam as a series owned the trucks, it stops really being a competition. Now, they still held racing, and freestyle was a really big deal, but when the series owns, if Penske owned every car in the IndyCar series, is it really that much of a sport? So Gravedigger sells out. Now here's the thing. Pace Motorsports, now known as Feld, tried to buy Bigfoot. They wanted Bigfoot. They wanted to have Bigfoot and Gravedigger and Monster Jam all the time. And Bob Chandler said, absolutely not. So they parted ways with Monster Jam, and Bigfoot did exactly one Monster Jam event after 1998. They did one event in 2003, and since then, Bigfoot has never been back. Which is crazy, because Monster Jam is the most wealthy, the most popular, the most visible monster truck series in the world. And it's crazy to me because Bigfoot is still very popular, but Bigfoot isn't what Bigfoot used to be. Now everyone just talks about Gravedigger. Gravedigger and Maximum Destruction and all those things. But Bigfoot, he's still the first and the greatest, but the brand has fallen. But that's because they had a falling out with Pace Motorsports in 1998. So, Monster Jam made freestyle an official scored part of monster truck competition in 1999. Racing was still, quote-unquote, the main event, but fans were really starting to expect freestyle. And you're starting to see, now that freestyle is a scored competition, so to speak, they're putting obstacles on the floor for freestyle only, and there's more freestyle focus and things, and slowly fan attention is starting to change to where, yeah, freestyle, that's the main event. Racing is cool, but freestyle that's the big one, So this happens in 1999. In 2000, a whole bunch of drivers and promoters came together to form what was called Pro MT, or Pro Monster Trucks, Professional Monster Trucks. And this was a series that was going to run monster truck drag racing. They were going to do official dragster style timing and scoring with like radar detection for speeds and timing and boundaries, and the tracks were going to be a specific length, and every race was going to be at like an International Speedway Corporation NASCAR track. Kentucky, Kansas, Chicagoland, Daytona, Talladega, where they'd basically run them on the infield on the front stretch. They'd run them in that grass there where there's like 600 feet of open space. And they was called the Truxpo, where I have it listed here somewhere, the Truxpo Truck Tour. And they ran this Truxpo Truck Tour for 3 seasons. Now, the thing that makes this serious is the fact that there's no freestyle, no 3D truck bodies. So trucks like Alan Pizzo's Predator, he ditches the like feline 3D body and goes to just a normal Chevy truck. And Samson was known for having these giant muscular arms on the front of the truck that were going forward along the sides of the truck. Ditch that. So it was taking it very seriously, and it was having open qualifications and stuff. And it was okay popular, but it wasn't Monster Jam. And then in 2001, they started allowing freestyle. And by 2002, the series was over. After the 2002 season, the Truxpo series, Truxpo pulled their sponsorship, so it went away. But Pro MT continued to sponsor some events until 2005, when they ceased operations and sold all their stuff and called it a quits. Now, Monster Jam is still running strong. Racing, freestyle, and they had what's called the World Finals, where like the top 24 trucks in Monster Jam get invited to go to Las Vegas. It was at Sam Boyd Stadium in Las Vegas, and they have a big racing competition in freestyle, and whoever won both, you'd win those championships for the year. It's not a points series, mind you. Points series went away in, I think, 2000, and they just, by this time, that's where Monster Jam is. It's just a show, and then they invite some drivers to the World Finals, and if you win the event, you win. And that's where it was for a long time, and that's where Monster Trucks as a sport, in my opinion, lost all legitimacy. When it stopped being an actual season-long season and started just being an entertainment industry. So, in 2007, I don't know their names, but there was this mom-and-pop promoters. They created what was called MLMT, or Major League of Monster Trucks, and it was much like Penda and much like Pro MT. It was supposed to be open qualifying, Monster Trucks racing competition, but they were going to have freestyle, and they were having these really elaborate courses, and they went bankrupt after 1 year, and they folded. And from 2008 onwards, Monster Jam was the only major show in town. Now, of course, there was Checkered Flag Productions and small arena shows, but as a like big boy, big track series, Monster Jam is the only show in town for a long time. There's another circuit out there now that competes with Monster Jam, but I don't know their names, and they aren't super big. But Monster Jam is basically the only show in town. So, following MLMT, there was not a serious points championship. In Monster Jam, reintroduced a points series in 2015. And today, all Monster Jam events during the season from January to May, when their season runs, counts towards an invitation to the annual World Finals. When I heard that Monster Jam was going back to a point series, a part of me was really happy. Now, it's not what I would want, because it's not a whoever gets the most points wins the championship. It's whoever gets the most points gets invited to the World Finals to compete, which, it's like the NASCAR playoffs. I mean, I guess it's a championship, but is it really? Where it's like, you do all this thing and you dominate, and then you just get invited and lose anyways, and, that whole thing. So, it's baby steps. Now, the reason Monster Jam drives from January to May is because that's when all the college football and NFL stadiums are empty. Period. That's it. That's why they do it. That's why they do it in January to May. And that's why Ford Field has Monster Jam every February, and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta's got it in like March. It's the same thing. Every NFL stadium, whole bunch of college stadiums, Gator Bowl, Citrus Bowl, those kind of things. So, Cotton Bowl. So that's very much where Monster Jam makes their money, and then they go. It used to be the World Finals was always in Vegas, but I don't think it is anymore. Now that Allegiant Stadium is there, they don't want anyone. There's a legal thing where no one can use Sam Boyd Stadium anymore. So the World Finals has kind of moved on. And I think it's in Tampa now, but don't quote me on that. I don't remember. I haven't been following Monster Jam as much as I did when I was 12. So many years ago. So where does this leave us? So Monster Jam is an incredible product. I've been there multiple times. It's fan-freaking-tastic, and they're really good. The whole product is 2 hours. Racing is very fast, and they keep the things going, and there's constantly things to keep the children's attention span engaged. The whole thing takes like 2.5 hours, and you're done. It's clinical. It's awesome. I wish more sporting events were that just... It's like ballet. They just run the whole thing really fast, and it's really tight, and freestyle is amazing, and they do stunt competitions and all this stuff. It's incredible, and it's, as an entertainment product, it's some of the best you can get as an entertainment product. And where does that really, and truthfully, as much as I would love an F1 or IndyCar style championship series devoid of freestyle and all the non-racing spectacle, monster trucks as an industry is in a reasonably healthy space the way it is. While the legitimacy of a racing series is no longer, monster trucks isn't a motorsport, they're motorsport entertainment. That's what they call themselves. They are an entertainment business. Monster trucks continue to wow crowds. Monster Jam is international. They go to Copenhagen and Berlin and Frankfurt and London and all over the world. And monster trucks aren't a motorsport because fans didn't want them to be a motorsport anymore. They wanted an entertainment product, and you know what? Maybe that's okay. Think about it. If the fans wanted IndyCars to be an entertainment product, that's what IndyCars would become, because that's how the market works. The free market works that way. So fans chose. They didn't want Pro MT. They didn't want Major League of Monster Trucks. They didn't want Penda. They wanted Monster Jam, and Monster Jam won. And maybe that's a good thing, because what would be worse for us monster truck fans out there? What would be worse? Having the only show in town being an unpopular racing series that nobody goes to, that goes bankrupt, and monster trucks just ceases to exist. Or you have Monster Jam, which isn't a real motorsport. It's a motorsport entertainment business. And now don't get it twisted. Those guys are freaking athletes. Some of the stuff that those drivers do, don't get it twisted. They're athletes. It's just not a motorsport. It's a motorsport entertainment business. And that's fine. Honestly. That's fine. That's the way it's gotta be. There are, the Monster X Tour and the Toughest Monster Tour. There are other smaller regional tours out there that do a points championship. And that's fine for them. But the big dogs are a motorsport entertainment business, and we have to make peace with that. Because it's what's best for monster trucks as an industry. So that's where we are. That's the complete history of monster truck racing from birth of monster trucks to present day. I really hope this was entertaining. Please let me know if you thought this was entertaining. I put some music in the background of this one to kind of make it less monotonous, and I hope that, because if you didn't quite pick up on it, almost everything I said was off of memory. I wrote some things down to keep my mind in order, but I just know all this stuff, so I was hoping that my more improvised, kind of off-the-cuff, loose, just talking about it kind of thing, I hope that was better. I hope you enjoyed that. So let me know. Leave a comment. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon on YouTube, leave a comment, tell me what you thought. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music and everywhere else that podcasts are available. Share the episode with your friends, help us grow. Share it on social media. Next week, I'm probably going to get back to regularly scheduled programming, sports news. But occasionally, like in July, August, I'm probably going to do 2 more of these kind of history, non-relevant episodes, because I'm, vacations and stuff like that. So if you like this kind of history thing, let me know, because I can do more of these. I've NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, rally racing, dragsters. There are so many possibilities for what you can do from a research and history perspective. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going to be for these, gotta mix it up, or, Yeah, that's what we're going to be. Instead of just doing like opinion pieces occasionally, I like these history episodes because I'm a history. I have a bachelor's degree in history. I studied history in college. I love history, and I know how to research. I can do these kind of things. So if all of y'all like the history episodes, then tell me we can do more of these occasionally. All right. My name is H. James K. Thank y'all for tuning in. Until next time.